Professor Trevor Ngwane, who is going to lead us in starting off our 3 decades of democracy in South Africa, promises, perils, and potential. Professor Ngwane is the director of the Center of Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. In addition to his academic credentials, which I'll come back to in a minute, Professor Ngwane has a long and distinguished career as an activist. His activism had an early start. He and his brother attended a Catholic boarding school near Durban, where he was expelled for participating in spontaneous school strikes after the Soweto uprising in 1976. In 1979, Professor Ngwane enrolled in the University of Fort Hare, where he studied sociology. He was expelled in 1982 for participating in student strikes. Later, he was the National Education Officer for the Transport General Workers Union of the Congress of the South African Trade Unions. In 1995, he was elected Ward Councillor for Pimville Zone 5 and 7 in Soweto on the African National Congress ticket. In 1999, he was expelled by the ANC for opposing the City of Johannesburg's privatization of municipal services. I think you see the pattern. Regarding his academic career, in 2011, Professor Ngwane attained a Master's of Arts degree in Development Studies from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and in 2016, he obtained a Doctorate of Philosophy from the University of Johannesburg, for which he wrote the thesis that was later adapted into the book, AMA Committee, Grassroots Democracy in South African Shack Settlements. Today's keynote address draws from Professor Ngwane's academic and activist experience, which in his life and career have been, of course, inextricably intertwined. The title of his address you see on the screen there, Leading or Fading, Reevaluating and Reasserting the Role of the Labor Movement in South Africa's Struggle. Please help me in giving a warm welcome on this cold, rainy Rhode Island day to Professor Trevor Ngwane.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here at Brown and talking about 30 years of democracy in South Africa. So I appreciate the invitation and your interest in what is happening in our country. And it reminds me of the bond that South Africa shares with the USA, such as that both countries settler, colonial, racial, capitalist social formations. But in particular, I remember how thousands of Americans, not least workers, supported our struggle during the dark days of apartheid. So recently, I and many comrades were inspired by the struggles of the auto workers in the US against VW and those people. So it's an inspiration because we also have VW, Mercedes-Benz, Ford companies organized by NUMSA, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. I remember clearly a few years ago, we had a strike on campus at the University of Johannesburg, and a member of the UAW came. He happened to be around and gave a message of solidarity. So before I go on, I just want to comment that a great concern to me personally and to many comrades in South Africa and the world, I imagine, are the atrocities taking place against the people of Palestine. So, you know, apartheid was bad and brutal, but I think what is happening in Palestine is genocide. So no one should stand aside. We should all find ways to show our solidarity and to fight against the Zionist Israel government. In addressing the question of assessing 30 years of democracy in South Africa, I chose to focus on the labor movement for many reasons. One of them is that I believe that working class solidarity is distinctive and possesses what I call the power of the producer. For example, with Palestine, workers can conduct blacking action and refuse to handle goods being shipped to and from Israel, and that would be a direct blow on the Zionists. Working class solidarity derives from the nature and character and power of the working class. Marx argued that the working class is the revolutionary subject because it has the potential power of waging a revolutionary war against the capitalist class with a real chance of victory. And this is because everything we see around us is produced by the hands of workers or is in one way or another connected to production. The working class is also the class of the future and can and must be the future ruling class in society because as producers, it does not need to exploit any other class in order to meet its needs. Organized labor, trade unions, are part of what we can call, in general terms, the working class movement. It's a movement, especially when the masses are in motion fighting against the exploiter and oppressor, fighting for their needs. So workers and their unions are an important component of this movement, which we saw clearly during the struggles against apartheid in the 80s. It's a broad movement in which various social groups, movements, organizations, and individuals can participate. Workers are not always the vanguard of the working class movement. I mean trade unions, organized labor. For example, in 1976 in South Africa, the students were at the forefront of the anti-apartheid struggle. They were its vanguard for a while. We also saw this with the American civil rights movement. It was not led by the trade unions. Similarly, the Black Lives Matter movement was not led by the unions, but it was indeed a movement of liberation, what I call a working class movement. However, Rosa Luxemburg notes in her discussion of the mass strike that any major political event like Black Lives Matter, anti-apartheid upheaval, any such political event which challenges the power of the ruling class directly invariably gives rise to many economic struggles, specific economic struggles. It's as if, according to Luxemburg, the political upheavals makes the workers' economic problems intolerable, and then they just want to fight. So there is that symbiosis between political and economic struggles. So today I want to ask the question, what is the true meaning of the role of labor in social struggles? Indeed, in economic struggles. And I think that the South African experience gives us some lessons. So as we celebrate or as we commemorate 30 years of democracy in South Africa, very few people are talking about the role of labor, except perhaps insofar as employed and unemployed workers are potential voters in the coming national election. So the aim of my talk, which is why I chose this topic, I don't want the role of labor to be downplayed, trivialized, elided, and erased when we tell the history of the struggle in South Africa, in the past, in the present, and in the future. These days, the ANC government prefers to present workers or to engage with workers as selfish people who go on strike, demanding, especially the public sector workers, demanding high wages and inflating the wage bill. So I think that this is part of what I can call making workers invisible as a strategy to stop workers organizing and leading a struggle against the capitalist system. So in South Africa, there is a process of rewriting history, especially led by ANC leaders and also other people. An aspect of this, which some of you might find surprising, but maybe not, is when the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu in the 1990s described South Africa as the rainbow nation of God. So he wrote a book actually called The Rainbow People of God, The Making of a Peaceful Revolution. And the foreword to the book was written by Nelson Mandela. So what Tutu was trying to do was to reflect on the country's diversity, its people, landscapes, cultures, wildlife, kind of trying to represent the unity of multiculturalism, the coming together of people from many different nations, races, during a time when the country was transitioning from apartheid to democracy. So it was a hopeful characterization. Something kind of, I'm not certain, but I think it's something akin to the American melting pot idea here. Diversity, multiculturalism, acceptance, and cohesion. So this characterization of the South African society as a rainbow came under attack in 2015 by university students throughout the country when they launched their Rhodes Must Fall movement. So this Rhodes Must Fall campaign by students was part of their call for the decolonization of higher education and an end to oppression and of exploitation in South Africa. The students said they were angry at the continuation of the pain and suffering and victimization of the black child. The students revived black consciousness as an ideology of struggle after this ideology had fallen into disuse and sidelined by the ANC's rainbow. Rhodes Must Fall campaign became a very powerful campaign, especially in its guise as the Fees Must Fall campaign, and again, the worker-focused campaign called Outsourcing Must Fall. Outsourcing Must Fall scored a decisive victory when it won against outsourcing and contracting out of cleaners, security workers in the universities, and all these workers were insourced. They became part of the university staff. Another way in which there is this rewriting of history is when the history of struggle is written as a convergence of the anti-apartheid pragmatism of South African capital, what we call these days white monopoly capital, and the anti-apartheid struggle of the masses. And both of these are said to be expressed in the rise of the ANC, taking the nation forward in the struggle for global international competitiveness. So the official history states that capital's opposition to apartheid came together with the struggle of the masses in a common unified struggle for a non-racial democracy. This is done in a way which excuses capital from its connivance with and enrichment from the apartheid system. So this myth of the rainbow nation of convergence downplays and denies the deep social structures of racial oppression found in post-apartheid society. It trivializes patriarchy. It glosses over the deeply socially structured exploitation of the working class and renders this, calls it poverty and inequality, stripping it from the capitalist relations and private ownership of which it is a product. The role of the working class, of the rank and file, of ordinary people is ignored, or at best, workers are projected as followers and supporters of great leaders who make history and bring hope and justice. The great Nelson Mandela, sometimes even the great Robert Sobukwe. So this great guy theory of history can also make claims about the role of organizations such as the ANC, how the ANC liberated the masses. So rather than the masses fighting their own struggle, liberating themselves through their own struggle, their own self-activity, this is attributed to great leaders, to great organizations. So this is a serious problem, for me at least, because it tells workers that their experiences of everyday life, this experience is not important, and that there are no real solutions, led, organized by workers themselves. And that the solution to the problems of everyday life are to be found from somewhere else, from this leader, maybe not from that leader, from supporting this organization rather than supporting that other organization. And you can see how this is so easy to do during times of elections when these organizations compete for the workers' vote. So, the socialist vision, the picture of an alternative government run by the workers, is replaced by the picture of the radical leader. It could be Nelson Mandela, Jacob Zuma, recently Julius Malema of the new youthful party, radical party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is a split from the ANC, which I'll discuss later. So the picture is that the place of the workers is about supporting that leader and placing their hope in that leader and that organization. So recently, there has been a challenge to the ANC and its pro-capitalist policies. There was what was called the NUMSA moment, when the Metal Workers Union split from the ANC, SACP, Communist Party, and COSATU alliance. But my argument is that despite this split, the politics of the great leader, of the great organization, continued with NUMSA leaders such as Comrade Ivan Jim, who is the General Secretary, and even the new federation which was formed, the South African Federation of Trade Unions, the leader, Comrade Vavi, replacing the bad ANC leaders. So the great guy theory of history survives, leads. During the struggle against South Africa, there was something called, I'm happy Comrade Dave Hampson is here, there was something called the progressive tendency from below. So, workers, communities coming out, fighting, organizing. But today I want to talk about what I call the progressive tendency from above. So, the split, the challenge to the ANC by NUMSA, the NUMSA moment, we find leaders like Vavi, like Jim, many others, pursuing pro-working class policies, needs, being radical, but the problem is that they don't break from this progressive tendency from above. So rather than socialism coming from below, it is socialism from above. It is based on the leader's control of the bureaucratic levers of a trade union. Yeah, I'm sure Marcel agrees here because he has studied NUMSA. So this is the same thing which Stalin tried and failed horribly in the Soviet Union. So the progressive tendency from above carries an inherent limitation and in fact militates against its objective and its content because it is from above and is not from below. So saying this is not just about an abstract principle, you know. It is about how this politics plays out on the ground. One of the biggest problems in the struggle in South Africa today is the crisis of the lack of confidence of workers in their own power to change history, to be that revolutionary subject that Marx talked about. So the progressive tendency from above makes this problem worse, and it further convinces workers that they can never by themselves be the solution. In fact, they cannot themselves be part of the solution. So the progressive tendency from above is not the progressive tendency. Now, today in South Africa, there's a general consensus that, well, across all classes, races, ages, that the ANC has failed. The ANC, which leads the government of national liberation. Even ANC supporters, indeed leaders, they acknowledge this. So far, the ANC has been able to escape with its sins, getting voted into power. But recently, in the last several elections, you know, its vote is declining. So the election in May, on the 29th of May of this year, there's a widespread belief that the ANC will lose its parliamentary majority. So this is a crisis not only for the ANC, but also for the ruling class, because up to so far, the ANC has done a good job in containing and maintaining the system of capitalism, of capital accumulation. It has done so mainly through this ANC Communist Party COSATU alliance, what Antonio Gramsci calls a historic bloc. So the ANC is not ruling alone. It's got the unions, it's got a Communist Party, and it's got also the civics. There's an organization called SANCO, the South African National Civic Organization. So if the ANC dips below majority, it's a crisis for this alliance. But my argument is that it's also a crisis for the ruling class. So we see the ruling class, Oppenheimer, funding various new political parties which are emerging from nowhere. I don't think it's because they want to undermine the ANC. They're just hedging their bets to make sure that, you know, the bourgeois orientation dominates whatever happens. Now, I think the reason why the ANC is in such, can't solve its problems, I've listed the problems there. It's a litany. I mean, yeah, you know, load shedding, GBV, it's terrible. It looks like South African men go around raping women. You know what, the capital country of rape, including child molestation. So my view is that what has happened is that the country is now living with the consequences of the failures of the ANC. So, for example, with rising unemployment, poverty, inequality, one result will be rising crime levels. Can you see? Yeah. So now the ANC doesn't know, is it dealing with the problem or the consequence? So it's too late for it to do anything. For example, the energy crisis, the frequent power failures, we now know that you've got people who steal electrical cabling. So when there is no power, that's when they get their chance to steal. So this is an impossible situation. And then, of course, the ANC scored a match-losing own goal when it failed to curb corruption and graft in its own ranks. So the party's reputation has been irretrievably tarnished by this culture of self-enrichment by means fair and foul. The current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who is a billionaire before he became president, came into office giving hope that he was going to deal with this. Hey, he's rich, he won't need to steal. I mean, we all know. But workers say that, he has got no need to steal. But everyone is disappointed because of a scandal where millions of, hundreds of thousands of US dollars were found in his mattress, So we don't know what was going on there here. So, so the real question is what will happen, once the ANC is out of power. But the real question is what will happen to the working class, because at the moment, everyday life is one of poverty, crime, and the worst part is not just the material deprivation, but is the political crisis of the working class, where people lose hope that there can be a solution, where workers lose confidence that they can do anything to improve the situation, where a vision of alternatives disappears. It's almost as if there is no alternative to the capitalist system. So that is the greatest crime of the ANC. I could talk about the climate change, flooding, killing workers, but due to time. So one thing I want to talk about is this hopelessness, which hardens into a lack of trust, where you hear ordinary workers saying, all politicians are the same. All political organizations are the same. Indeed, any organization will never help to improve the situation. So it's a kind of giving up, this lack of hope, lack of trust, lack of confidence. But we have found that somehow South Africa at one time was described as the protest capital of the world, because there's a lot of sporadic protests in communities, strikes also. So my perspective is that it's because together with the hopelessness, the fear, there is also from the lived experience of the workers, anger. So this anger kind of balances and challenges the hopelessness and drives these protests, these strikes. So if I had more time, I would go on, but basically we have to nurture, develop, encourage this anger. Sometimes it becomes a hatred, anger, hate. Sometimes it's linked to pride. We are proud of what we are. They are trembling on us. So this pushes against the hopelessness. And it's when workers are angry, when they feel that hate, that they break through their lack of confidence and they fight. So, looking at the time, I wanted to talk about a brief history of labor in South Africa, but I didn't even bring my notes on this because I knew that I would run out of time. So, but there's a picture of a guy called Jan van Riebeeck. So he was an ex-convict sent by the Dutch East India Company during the mercantile phase of capitalism to set up a halfway station in the Cape on their way to India. So, that's when the whole thing, the problem started. And then, of course, one of the things they did was to bring in slave labor. So, it wasn't only happening here in the States, from Malaysia and other countries. And then a significant development, of course, was the discovery of gold, earlier diamonds, which led to the development of a proletariat in South Africa. So in 1922, we had the great white mine workers strike, because when they had this mining gold, they brought in important artisans from England and other countries who were white. So from day one, white labor, occupied certain glorified positions. At first through necessity, but later through the bosses using divide and rule, and also through white workers themselves wanting to assert, their demands, their interests, using the white skin. But that 1922 strike was bombed to smithereens by Jan Smuts, and then later the bosses came up with a solution, which was to co-opt white workers and victimize black workers. So there was a strike by black mine workers in 1946, which many people were killed there. And then in 1973, there was the Durban strikes. Dave Hampson was there. You can tell us about that. But that was the birth of the labor movement, the trade union movement today. NUMSA, COSATU, cited as FOSATU actually, the Federation of South African Trade Unions. And then workers, COSATU, organized labor, played a very important role in the struggle against apartheid. I remember at one point, all the organizations were banned. Everyone was in jail. But the unions kept the fight going. So it's amazing that now that we are free, workers must still fight. So I can just note that in 2007 to 2010, and in 2010 there was public sector strikes, which for the first time challenged the ANC government as the employer. Despite all the class collaboration by ANC, COSATU, Communist Party, but workers came out and said, we demand what is due to us. So that strike, together with the community protests, was behind that great event, the Marikana massacre, when workers came out and said, enough is enough. It's better that you close the mines, go back to England with them, rather than us continuing the way we are. So the aftermath of this strike, usually, people say, oh, it was terrible, but I think the strike expressed what I can call the organic capacity of the working class to revive struggle. When that strike happened, many theoreticians were writing off the working class, but they changed their minds after this. So one of the things which happened, of course, after the strike, it inspired the NUMSA movement, because NUMSA in 2013, a year later, split from the ANC. On the mountain, during the strike in Marikana, Julius Malema formed his party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is a left challenge to the ANC. Within a couple of years, we had roads must fall, fees must fall. So this strike by workers, this massacre, injected something in the struggle. I call it, sometimes the strike can provide a center of authority for a flagging working class movement. I think that the auto workers strike in America is doing something like that here. It provides a center of authority that actually workers can lead the struggle. So, coming to lessons, so I'll just read them because I don't want to go over time. So basically, what happened is that during apartheid, which was linked to colonialism, the bosses, white monopoly capital, could hide behind racism. He's a racist, apartheid, the backward Afrikaners, can you see? Yeah, there was a whole thing about that. But the struggles of the workers, the strikes in Durban in the 80s, broke through that, what I call the invisibility of capital. So capital hides behind the state, the racist state. So the workers broke through that, and then the workers started to challenge private property and to demand the overthrow of capitalism and wanted a socialism. This was against the program of the South African Communist Party, which believed in a two-stage theory of revolution. No, first we must get democracy, and then much later we can fight for socialism. One thing which happened is that in a COSATU Congress, I think it was 1987, COSATU was adopting socialism as its vision. But a message came from the ANC through the South African Congress of Trade Unions, which was banned, SACTU, saying, don't adopt socialism. So the sellout began even during the days of, at the height of the struggle against apartheid in 1987. So the struggle was then and today is being undermined by the progressive tradition from above. The politics of class collaboration brings bosses' politics into the labor movement. So even though NUMSA was fighting, to liberate workers from the ANC, the alliance, but the way NUMSA operates, it's legalistic. You must apply, get a certificate for a strike. Only the leadership can decide on national campaigns, etc., etc. Of course, this is part of the law, the Labor Relations Act, which favors the bosses. So there were many lost opportunities. For example, during the public sector strike, it could have taken only a phone call for COSATU to call out private sector workers, but that never happened. And then a point I want to make is that solidarity is the soul of the working class movement, but I won't elaborate on that. So my last point is we need to focus on the working class itself. And one of the problems I've already mentioned is the lack of confidence. So whatever we do, we have to address that. So even when workers rise up, there's a new upsurge, you'll find that some of that demobilization remains, is carried into the new struggle. So it doesn't disappear of itself. We have to focus on the organic capacity of the working class. So sometimes workers are not always marching up and down, shouting amandla. But in what they are, they contain that potential to change society, to challenge capitalism. Of course, workers are under pressure, so they get these messages, and themselves, I mean, it's hard. So they look around for shortcuts, for someone who can save them. Julius Malema, I don't know, Ivan Jim or whoever, EFF. So there are no messiahs, no shortcuts. But there's always the need to provide a vision of alternatives, to talk about socialism, a way in which society could be run without the capitalist being in power. I've heard the auto workers here, and I'm so happy. I hear their leader, Sean Fain, I think, talking about corporate greed, something like Bernie Sanders. Yeah, but also, we should say openly, is the capitalists, and their rule must be stopped. We need socialism, but I think Bernie did that. Also, you know, we've got laws which tie hands around workers against action, strikes. We must challenge and defy these. And then we must tell workers, talk to workers, and they know that in their everyday struggle, always there's an enemy. There's the state, there's the bosses. So as long as a government of the capitalists is in power, the problems will always be there. We might win here, but they'll start over there. Ultimately, what is needed is for the workers themselves to take power. This requires a workers' party organizing the fight with a view to overthrowing the system. Of course, since I'm here, and it's a very important thing, VW is everywhere, international solidarity is very important. So with those few points, I think that we can resuscitate or understand what is involved in giving back the working class the role it deserves, you know, in the struggle against the post-apartheid rainbow nation, racial, capitalist, patriarchal, ecocidal, xenophobic order. Thank you very much. Amanda.
So thank you so much, Trevor. We have lots of time for questions and discussion. If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll pass you the microphone.
Thanks, Trevor. In a recent interview, Zwelinzima Vavi, my name is Ben Bradlow. I'm an assistant professor at Princeton. In a recent interview, Zwelinzima Vavi, the former leader of COSATU and of the breakaway SAFTU, talked about how, in his view, the worker movement, the formal worker movement, had become extremely disconnected from the informal settlements of large cities in South Africa. And I know you've written a lot about governance in the informal settlements. What's your take on how this story you're telling about worker power from below, and you've mainly been talking about the formal organized worker sector. What's your take about how that can connect to the informal workers and informal residents in South Africa, and why you see that, why, you know, to what extent you would agree with Vavi's evaluation and why that might be?
Do I respond immediately? Oh, okay. Okay, that helps then. I don't have to scribble notes. Yeah, so this is a very important question because remember I talked about the working class movement. So these are workers in motion. And the movement includes Okay, in general, when you talk of the working class, we mean also employed and unemployed workers. We even include retired workers. Sometimes we say the workers of tomorrow, the youth. But the working class movement is a clear, attempt to say workers at work, at the workplace, and at home in their communities are fighting, for their needs. Of course, if you don't get a good wage, a good salary, you're going to have problems with housing, with transport, because you just don't have the money. And if the government is not providing the social wage, enough public transport, cheap, you have a problem. With the middle class, especially the richer middle class, even if there's no public transport, they've got their car, so they're able to maneuver and have a better life. So for the working class to succeed, it cannot, as I say, stand on one foot, one leg, the workplace. It must also have its foot in the community. So when you talk of working class solidarity, it's an amazing thing that the people who can actually give the best solidarity to workers on strike is the unemployed workers when they refuse to be used as scabs. Can you see? So I remember in the 80s, we had a lot of boycotts. You remember Chilean boycott against Roundtree, the Swedes, and because when workers were on strike, the community, the unemployed, the retirees, the youth found a way and a reason to support them. But the class collaboration or corporatist approach of the alliance, of the Communist Party, of the ANC, of COSATU leaders, under Vavi's leadership, by the way, but he said he saw the light, okay, he says so, Hey, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have supported Zoom. So, I remember clearly in one Congress, COSATU passed a resolution saying the unions must not work with the social movements. At that time, there was something called the New Social Movements. We had organizations like Landless People's Movement, the Anti-Privatization Forum, Soweto Electricity Crisis Committee. There were so many, And then they were kind of shaking things in the community. And then COSATU said, no, don't work with those movements. They only worked with the Treatment Action Campaign. I don't know why. I won't blame the campaign, but that's what happened. So this was an attempt to keep the two struggles separate. So my argument is that when you keep those struggles separate, you are also serving to protect the bosses. You're also serving to keep the bosses invisible. And when you make the bosses invisible, you make them immune. Because remember, the guy who wants a house, he only sees the ANC government. He doesn't see the bosses behind the ANC government. Can you see? And it's going to be hard for that guy to almost spontaneously start fighting for a different organization of society, socialism. But that is easy when that guy in a shack is fighting shoulder to shoulder with an employed NUMSA worker. Can you see? So that division must be closed. So Vavi was right. NUMSA, in its special congress in 2013, it passed a resolution saying exactly that we must link up with the shack settlements, the informal settlements, with these community struggles. They are called service delivery struggles. But it said, tellingly, these leaderless struggles in the resolution. It said that. And then we're all happy, the left, when NUMSA movement. Because before that, we were pariahs. We were not allowed near the unions, You forgot to say that I was once, you did mention that I was an educator of the Transport and General Workers Union. They expelled me twice, can you see? So you can't survive the second expel. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, in any case, I lose my line of thought. Yeah, so it's like that, yeah.
Further questions? The floor is open.
I go right down. Sure.
I'm all on South African and I just moved here. I'm from South Africa. I was also involved in the labor movement. I won't mention the names.
I think you chose a good state.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask you about, with the emergence, obviously, of the EFF, and it would seem that the workers don't necessarily have a political home, so to speak, because the organizing is in shambles from that top-up approach. But when I look at the EFF, what can they do right, if I can put it to you directly? Can they do right to become that political party? Because they talk a lot about worker-centric issues. But at the same time, it does seem that it goes sometimes over my head because it's also all, for me as a general person in the general public, just becomes too philosophical. And sometimes there's also eccentric play there. But I just wanted to know, how do they become? Because from where I'm standing, the SACP is good as dead. And it's a shame. It's good as dead. It used to be the vanguard of, so-called vanguard, I guess, from the top up, I guess. But I just wanted to know, is there a possibility, if I can put it fairly, for the EFF to become that worker-centric political party?
Yeah, there is a possibility of that happening, but maybe Comrade Musa can answer that because she was at one point close to the EFF. Yeah. Yeah, okay. But in any case, one problem of the EFF, of course, is the great guy theory of history. Yeah, because Malema, he runs that organization, with the iron fist. I remember we had something called the Democratic Left Front. We were trying to organize as the left. And then we had a meeting with the EFF. So their meeting is called the War Council, okay? So we went there. There was only 4 of us or 5 with Rehat. I can't remember. No one. So we come and sit there. And then there's like 15 of them, in this, I won't say palatial, but it did look formidable. In 2-3 hours, the only person who spoke on the side of the EFF was Malema. Yeah. And the only time his deputy, Floyd, spoke was when he forgot something and said, "Hey, fighter, who is that guy we met?" And then he says, "It's Joe." "Okay, yeah, it's Joe." And, and then I believe that, although I must be careful, but I believe that, you can see why I get fired. I believe that Malema is prepared to use violence to protect his grip, maintain his grip over the organization. Can you see? Yeah. And then the other thing is, Malema himself is a boss. As you know, he's a millionaire from when he was president of the ANC Youth League. Can you see? And they've, it's not something I'm saying. People say, but these guys are wearing Gucci. Okay, you can say, why is he wearing nice African shirts? But it's not Gucci. But they're kind of creating that culture of, the elitist, chic revolutionaries. And it ties in too tightly with the progressive tradition from above, can you see? So that undermines everything. Also, the same way as maybe Fighter Malema wants to control his organization. So when he reaches out, or when EFF reaches out to work with other movements in the township, they do that. But that element of wanting to keep control, you can sense it, can you see? So it makes it hard. for it to be a genuine working class organization. It would be hard for it to be part of a working class movement. It would have to change. Some people have said maybe if Malema resigned, or I don't know. But yeah, so that's the situation. Yeah. In any case, I don't think it's a workers' party. But I won't, like I call the ANC, call it a capitalist party, at least not yet. But the problem with radical African nationalism is that the ANC was like that, very radical outside. As soon as it grips power, then they change and now want to cooperate with the bourgeoisie, you know. So that's what is going to happen if the EFF takes power. Yeah.
Someone else?
Thank you for your speech, Prof. My name is Kipi Simani. I'm a Kenyan student doing my master's at WITS, actually. And I had a question where you mentioned international solidarity and its importance. How do we reconcile the need for international solidarity when the working class in SA is not just South Africans now? Because more increasingly it's people from Malawi, people from Zim, people from Botswana who are also trying to get by every day. But there's that wedge of xenophobia that really prevents the working class as a whole from uniting. Mm-hmm. How do you, I guess, prevent a hierarchy of the South African working class first, then maybe, you know, other passports second?
Yeah. So this is such an important question. So some of these issues is not just South African. I mean, in the US, I think you have the same problem, whereby the bosses, you know, they are vultures, you know, they're trying to make money. And then they look around, what is an obstacle? Can you see? And then they create and find this dirt cheap, easy to exploit, vulnerable group of workers. Can you see? And then sometimes we get confused. How can the bosses want cheap labor, but at the same time, they are constantly deporting, being xenophobic? Exactly. They want to keep you vulnerable, the better to exploit you. Can you see? So if workers from Mozambique, Zimbabwe, I'll use the example of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe workers under Mandela, there was something called the ZEP, the Zimbabwe Exemption Permit, whereby, because everyone was escaping Robert Mugabe, you know, he was messing up, killing people, destroying everything. So South Africa couldn't cope, you know, so they said, okay, let's give these people a special permit, can you see, for 4 years. So when you get that special permit, you can settle down, you get a job, can you see? Yeah, so you can think. And if your boss at work starts doing funny things, you know, you're secure. You've got your brothers, your sisters, you know where the union office is, etc. But if you are vulnerable, precarious, you don't have a permit or it has expired, you know, the boss threatens you, I'll report you to the Department of Home Affairs. So this is the problem. So the Zimbabwe exemption permit, which is 4 years, was renewed 3 times. And then suddenly the minister says, I'm not going to renew it. Can you see? Yeah. So this throws these workers from Zimbabwe. Some of them have, you know, they've got families, they've got houses. So they are back to being vulnerable, easy to exploit, you know, migrants. So this is the issue. Fortunately, some unions, such as the Federation, SAFTU, VAVI himself, social movements have mobilized against this. But the situation is dire because last year or the year before, we now have an organized movement against so-called illegal foreigners called Operation Dudula. So Tudula is Zulu, to bulldoze. So we don't want these illegal foreigners. But when you listen to these illegal foreigners, they don't want any foreigner. Can you see? Yeah. And it's a struggle, you know, a fight to the bottom. So, but I once spent an hour or two or a few days with a guy called Horace Campbell, who is a Jamaican radical. So he said, Trevor, there is no South African economy. Can you see? And he went on, and I believe him, you know. It's Lesotho, Swaziland, Zimbabwe. We are one, okay, we can call it regional economy. Can you see? But actually, we are one country, we are one area. Can you see? And Marx did say, the working people have got no country. So increasingly, I'm thinking, because, you know, after NUMSA disappointed us with the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, I'm going to come up with the Workers' Party if it takes me 10 years. And I think that party, okay, you know, we never talk that way as the left, but I'm getting old, I can say what I like. But that party, but I think that party should not be a South African party. It should be a Southern African party, because it just doesn't make sense. So we've got an organization called Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia. You know, Kopanang come together. So we've got that organizing against xenophobia. But xenophobia makes the boss stronger. It divides workers. It eats away solidarity, you know. So it's a very good question. It's an issue which we must address here.
Trevor, some marvelous points. What we had in South Africa was a revolution, and then it was stalled. Now, this question, you're right with all the hopelessness and the terrible social problems and the disintegration of the state that's been happening, but there's still embers burning. Just a quick one. You know, do you think that those embers can light up again? Just one illustration. I spoke at the graduation of Workers' College in Durban in December, early December last year. And there was so much toy-toying. Even after when I spoke, and I gave a very moderate speech. I mean, I didn't just raise the ceiling for the sake of raising a ceiling. Even then, that toy-toying went on so long that the hotel staff was saying that the roof will come down. You know, it's actually a problem. So look, is it possible that the wind will blow on those embers and the flames will rise again?
Yeah, this is most important, to not only believe that, but there's no alternative to that, because otherwise we give up. But one thing I can say, which is, you know, in my mind, in my preparation, was the South African working class was never defeated by capital. Can you see? Like Dave says, there was a revolution in the 80s. People were moving. Children were saying we want socialism. You know what I mean? Yeah. But through the leadership, bringing in bourgeois politics, and also through the victory over apartheid. So, you know, I remember when we got our independence, you know, workers would say, you know what, I think Mandela is just fooling these whites. He wants them to lull them to sleep, you know. And then once we get out, then we kill them. Can you see? Yeah. Yeah, it was like that. I had a friend, you know, who was a teacher, so he used to hang around, you know, smoking material. And then, so, you know, but we're now young adults, can you see, working. So we're talking about, hey, man, maybe we should, you know, buy houses, can you see? And then we said, no, man, we don't need to buy houses. When we get our liberation, we'll be walking like the Cubans to the mansions and taking over. This was, we believe that it was going to happen that way. Yeah, so it was indeed a revolution. and then it was nipped in the bud. But, so something was given. You can, at that time it was called one man, one vote. One person, one vote. No more pass laws. For the frisky, you can marry a white woman. Can you see? Yeah, but the deal was white monopoly capital continues, sitting on the money. There was a side deal, black economic empowerment. So they said, okay, we'll give some of you top leaders of the ANC, capital. Indeed, the first millionaires in South Africa were all members of the ANC National Working Committee. Saki Macozoma, Ramaphosa, you can Tokyo, all of them. Yeah. So the revolution was nipped in the bud. In fact, there's a series of books. Who's that guy, Murray something? Yeah, is the revolution, deferred. There's even Adam Habib, the suspended revolution. There's all these revolution. So there's an agreement that there was a revolution in the making. Part of what I was saying, I was trying to show that part of derailing the revolution was the progressive tendency from above. Suddenly, hey, everyone loves Mandela, even the bourgeoisie, yeah. And then this struggle, which was happening in the deepest rural hinterland in the Transkei, was, by people, I don't know, suddenly was just embodied in this one guy who emphasized, I am a disciplined member of the ANC. So you can see the channeling and denial of the role of ordinary people and stamping, the revolution as something which happened from the top. Yeah. So that's how the revolution was deferred, suspended, blocked, stifled, postponed, deflected. Yeah. And certainly, it was not, the workers were not defeated. As you say, Dave, if you're in South Africa and I start a song, it's true, we would sing until, because everyone believes we can do it. Unfortunately, with that militancy. So it's at those times that we must stand up and challenge the workers about the loss of hope, about the belief in messiahs, about shortcuts. One of the problems, like at my university, so workers get fed up with this union, then they join another union, then they get fed up. Even within that union, they get fed up with that leader. But it's because it's hard to struggle. So the solution is not easy. So everyone wants a bit of, give me some slack, maybe if we get him. So I think we have to address those problems. Yeah, the remobilization comes with problems. I think in the US, you are gonna really have to work hard because there's such a lot of sedimentation. Can you see? Yeah, so, already I can hear some things. But that's the only way, to challenge directly, openly. Of course, with workers, you can't be tactless. You must be with them. I had a whole section on how to talk with workers, how to challenge their fears, how to listen. Because the only way we can have a revolution is when ordinary workers feel, we must have a revolution. It's not going to happen in books or in speeches. It is when so this is the work which must be done. Unfortunately, just my last point, NUMSA, when they started saying, okay, they formed the United Front, and then they went out to work, they wanted to work in the township. We found that these shop stewards, they forgot how to organize in the township. Can you see? They're just messing up, falling all over themselves. They can't speak to ordinary people. Can you see? I'm not saying that out of derision. It was a challenge to us. Okay, NUMSA is with us. but they're just messing up, can you see? And then it all disappeared. Yeah, so we need those lessons. You know, Dave, you said something about writing books. We must write those books about how it was done. And then the youth, when the youth stand up, something which happened 100 years ago, for the youth, it's like it happened yesterday. It's like it happened now. Yeah, that's what happened with Fees Must Fall. They're now reading Frantz Fanon, reading, I don't know, all sorts of books, can you see? Yeah, as if, you know, all those critiques never happened. So let's write the books. Let's document what workers have done. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. I have a question about revolutionary militancy. So I was wondering, you mentioned the Marikana massacre, and that happened in the same year that kind of Black Lives Matter here kind of first started. And I was wondering, I think one of the major failures of that movement is the lack of militancy. And so I was really attracted, or sustained militancy rather, and I was very attracted to your emphasis on nurturing hate and anger as integral to the kind of consolidation of a working class party. And so I was wondering how that allows you to think about the role of a kind of revolutionary militant front that could prohibit prohibit the kind of massacres that working class parties and movements suffer when they do decide to move.
Or avoid massacres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, firstly, when you talk about hate, you know, I remembered, you know, Nina Simone has got this song, Revolution. Yeah. They'll say, I'm preaching hate, but we hate the system. Yeah, we hate the system. I mean, what it does to people. Yeah. So the only problem is that when we organize ourselves, for example, with the roads must fall, fees must fall, even the unions, it's not as if the bosses or the state is going to stand aside and watch us, even cheer us on. They take action to undermine what you're doing. Can you see? Yeah. And to push them back, you need a politics. And militance by itself is not that politics. You know, so this is what happens with these movements. You know, I don't know, maybe Black Lives Matter. Certainly, with fees must fall, roads must fall. So, you know, there were students read Frantz Fanon. Every generation must, I can't remember what he says. Suddenly, the students were the vanguard, okay? Okay, maybe I'm contradicting myself because I did say they are the vanguard, yeah. But now the vanguard, which is like insular, inward-looking, getting all the answers from itself, doesn't know anything how to push back the state, how to defend itself from all the interventions. The state doesn't just send troops with guns, although it also sends infiltrators, agent provocateurs. It also has a propaganda. You know, these people are like this. Can you see? Yeah. And also, within the movement, we have different politics. You get I'm not saying the middle class can't be revolutionary, but you get what I can call the middle class types. Can you see? Yeah, so they are not organizing out of an experience which would of itself generate that hatred, that, can you see, determination. Yeah. You know, they killed the Marikana workers. I don't know, it was a Tuesday or a Monday, but they continued with their strike for 3 weeks after that. The strike got stronger, not weaker. Can you see? Yeah. So I think maybe to avoid massacres, we have to organize more and more people. yeah, and yeah, and also organize a stronger politics. So for us in South Africa, the left, I'm sure Comrade Musa will agree, the Marikana experience taught us a lot. Yeah, you know, I mean, Luke even wrote a book, The Spirit of Marikana. Can you see? We have to learn. How did the workers do that? Those workers, they organized against their union, the National Union of Mine Workers. Can you see? Yeah. They organized, there was no workshop, no film showing them, you know, it was pure expression of the organic capacity of the working class. So our job, we have to find out if they can do it in Marikana, what is stopping the other workers from expressing, acting out that organic capacity? So that is a big question, and it cannot be answered in one day. And it cannot be answered away from workers. Yeah, yeah. So personally, I'm not saying I'm a revolutionary saint. I also get lazy, but I do try at the university at least 3 times a week talk to workers or one, you know, because that keeps you connected and grounded. Otherwise, so it's not, you know, intertextual debates. It's about how real workers feel, act at that time. And it's not just listening to what they say. You have to engage with them, challenge them, find out. So it's real, yeah. It's visions, it's tactics, it's programs, it's difficulties, it's distortions. But that's why it's called a struggle, yeah. So, yeah.
So we're running up against time. Mike doesn't seem to be working with Trevor, I protected you against having to remember 2 or 3 questions at a time.
Yeah, but you
We're
can
running
do
out
it,
of time.
yeah.
I want to see if
Yeah.
there are more than one hit. If there are more people than one who has a question, we can collect 2 or 3 questions and then ask for a brief response. If you have anyone else that you have a question? Anyone else? All right, then this will be our last question. One in the back. So I'm going to ask you guys each to ask your questions briefly, and then you can respond to both of them.
Okay.
Hello. Okay, thanks, Conrad. Yeah, I just want to follow on the thread that's been running here, and pick up on the thing that you said. You know, one of the sort of points that runs through your talk is about confidence, right? Confidence of the working class to, take the power, and it strikes me that one of the dynamics of the last 3 decades is sort of the crushing of that spirit, right? Which is why Marikana was so amazing, and there was that sense around 2013, 2014, 2015. There was this reinvigoration of a sense of, okay, actually we do have a little bit of there was some momentum going. But then it was lost. That's from my perspective anyway. And it strikes me that one of the things that's been sort of crushed over the last 30 years is that sense of empowerment. And part of it is about the rise to power of the ANC and people directing their hopes there, right? Saying, exactly what you're pointing to, right? The big man theory and the idea that, we'll just wait here, it will be delivered to us. And so it strikes me that one of the things that's going on, you mentioned the ANC is collapsing, the ruling class is losing its political, guidance there, right? It's also a moment where that organization, that body that was supposed to deliver, that people have been waiting for, maybe now that's going to disappear as well. Maybe those shackles of that sort of expectation of delivery are disappearing as well. But it's not clear to me where that confidence is going to come from, right? It could just as well dwindle into disillusionment, right? Which is what I think we see a lot of as well. So it's a little bit of a question of, kind of Dave was asking where are the embers still burning, right? Related to that, where's that confidence going to come from? At what point are people going to look and say, hey, this is our moment now to build something new. We got to stop waiting for somebody else to build it, but we're going to build it ourselves.
Hey, thank you for everything you had to say today. I guess I just wanted to ask you to clarify. You kind of mentioned the UAW and Sean Fain in brief, and kind of mentioned this center for authority kind of idea. I was wondering if you could expand on that. And I also, I guess, just wanted to clarify that during the strike over the summer, which I also found really inspiring, but well, yeah, I guess it's kind of complicated because Sean Fain is the president, and that is like it's not so much a spontaneous moment. It's actually like led by organizers and by a union infrastructure, but it did have like an inspirational militancy to the point where Sean Fain said it a couple speeches, like, we are fighting a class war, like this strike here is a class war. And so I feel like I understand your critiques of the great man theory, but also like inspirational people at times can make the right difference as well. So yeah, I guess I wanted your perspective on kind of all of that a little more.
Yeah, Sean Fain inspired me too. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I was really taken aback. Wow, in America, hey, this is amazing. I'm sorry. But, it's inspiring. But, with, for example, NUMSA, even the Communist Party, you get a lot of rhetoric, but the practice is the opposite, can you see? But in this instance, Sean Fain was doing something real and leading a strike, can you see? It could be. It's almost like trying to imagine the Russian Revolution without Lenin. I think Stalin would remember. Stalin, he was siding with the Mensheviks, saying no, let's join that first government of Kerensky. Yeah, can you see? Yeah, and then Lenin came up with his April thesis and said, no, we must. So yes, there is the role for the leader, for the individual. Can you see? But the leader, because, okay, let's put it this way, which maybe will be clearer. So this is what happened in South Africa with the NUMSA movement, which, by the way, was killed by the NUMSA leadership. So NUMSA killed its own moment, yeah. So what happens when the progressive tradition from below meets with the progressive tradition from above? So this is the issue. Yeah, what happens? Can you see? Yeah, and then that's where now we find that shaking and moving, and can you see? Yeah. For example, if you've built NUMSA as a bureaucratic hegemon where you have all the power, but now you want to move the class together with are you prepared to sacrifice your position? Are you prepared to take steps against the kind of union and unionism which you are a part of? So that is why we need revolutionaries. Yeah. So this is the question. Yeah. So there are too many pressures on leaders, on organizations to cede space to the demands of the bourgeoisie, can you see? But I don't think that strike would have happened, even succeeded, without that thing from the top, can you see? Yeah. But that thing from the top, we have to be careful of it, that it's always directed from the bottom. So that pressure from below must always be there. So what happened with NUMSA? The pressure from below, from Marikana, pushed these Stalinists, because that's what Jim and them were at the time, to the left. Can you see? But when that pressure subsided, then all the Stalinist filth and habits came back. Can you see? Yeah. Of course, it's different with, say, a capitalist government like the ANC. With that, workers must not, use pressure. They must use force to make it do what is right. But with their own leaders in their own organization, they must maintain that pressure so that Sean Fein doesn't relax. I heard him now saying, okay, maybe it's realistic. The pensioners, okay, he's going to do them in a kind of gradual way. So some workers are not going to get the pension payout. Okay, it makes sense, but the way he said it was, I've agreed with the bosses. So okay, but sometimes you cannot say there is no compromise. Can you see? The only problem arises when the compromise which emerged because of a specific time-bound balance of forces now is carried even when the balance of forces has changed. Now, when workers say, no, but we are strong enough now to demand that all pensioners get their money now. We don't want Sean Fein to say, no, but we made a deal with the bosses. Can you see? Yeah. So that's what happens with people like NUMSA. Yeah. So they become police of the union contract. So the contract is made based on a balance of forces. But Sean Fein, the UAW, might inspire the workers to become stronger, to build. Hey, now we've got 100,000 more members, can you see? Yeah. Now, those compromises must be revisited. Yeah, he cannot say, no, according to the way we work, we sign the contract once a year or once in 3 years. But that's what eventually happens in the unions. So that's what we must watch. And one way to fight that is to talk about these things openly. Oh, okay, Comrade President, this is a good deal given the balance of forces now. But we must fight to change it so that you can get a better deal. Can you see? Hey, we can't say we want to get rid of corporate greed and even have socialism if we can't change the balance of forces to change this compromise. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But that's what unionists do. But I believe in Sean Fein like you, so I'm not doubting him at all. But I was just saying, yeah. Yeah, so my last point is the confidence. So there is one thing which people do on the left. So they search for solutions everywhere else, but not from the workers. Can you see? So when we talk of the organic capacity of the workers, we're saying the workers, the way they are, in their everyday struggles. We can talk of the barricades of everyday life. When a worker wakes up, he must think, have I got money for transport? He must think, have I got money for my kid? He must, so that experience, it's daily. And there's a lot of helping each other, sharing, compassion, ingenuity, great solutions, inspiration from just managing the barricades of everyday life. So that is where the organic capacity, that is where the seeds of socialism are born. Now, in South Africa, during the social movements, I was part of them. Comrades were like, yeah, we are moving the revolution. But they see that from their own radicalism, their own militants. They don't. So you look for treasures far, but the treasure is there in front of you with ordinary workers. So that That is my politics, or that's the politics I push. It's there, yeah. The workers don't need to be anything else. They are already that revolutionary subject. Marx said, the question is, how do we change the class for itself, the class in itself to be a class for itself? It's just a question of dealing with their reality and finding the obstacles which stop that organic capacity expressing itself in determination to fight. It happened in Marikana, you know. Yeah, it happened. It happened. In fact, if there were 10 Marikanas in South Africa, it would have been a revolution. Yeah, easily. Now, what happens? So the workers of Marikana, they open the door, okay? They allow Malema, they allow Jim and the NUMSA movement. The question is, where do we take that momentum? You know, how do we drive it? Do we push it to a direction where maybe, if necessary, we change the structure of the way we run our unions? Or do you want to hang on, you know, to the types of structures we have? Can you see? Where do we take it? Do we push it to undermine the progressive thing from the top? Or we want to maintain that? So I think Vavi, all of them, I think Musa will agree with me. They acted based on what happened in Marikana. They were touched by the spirit of Marikana. But where did they take it? So my last point is that even when workers are moving, you know, I think I already said this, those ideas, those weaknesses, that legacy of demobilization is there with them, and it must be challenged. Yeah, so it's not automatic that because they are moving, then all that goes away. But we stand a better chance of fighting and removing those problems when the workers are moving. So my last point is what you were saying, the center of authority. So sometimes the strike itself, you know, Black Lives Matter provided a center of authority for a while. Actually, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think we'd have had the UAW strike without Black Lives Matter. You know, I don't think so. But, you know, I'm so far away, I can't really comment. But it does. Good people, read that book it's short, by Rosa Luxemburg, The Mass Strike. So she explains how, you know, strikes can be organized, but during revolutionary periods, no one can organize strikes. They happen from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for a wonderful kickoff to our conference. I want to make two announcements. One, there are probably some of you in the room who don't know about the full conference, which begins tomorrow morning in McKinney, in the other Watson building at about 9:30. We have a second keynote address by William Shockey tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And then the second announcement is that we have a reception out here in the lobby, what we call the Agora, right now. So I invite everyone to come out and mingle and talk to each other, talk to Trevor, and further enjoy this afternoon. So thank you again, Trevor, for a wonderful kickoff.